Alexander the Great conquered the entire world. But the world never found him. After his death, his body vanished. Vanished forever. There is no tomb, no remains, no proof. The disappearance of the greatest conqueror in history has lasted for over 2,300 years. And more people believe it wasn't an accident. Someone is hiding it, intentionally. Maybe the entire system of history. This is the story of the king who vanished, and the secret that was never meant to surface. Alexander the Great, a man whose name still commands awe today. The conqueror of the world, a teacher of strategy, a deity among men. His military genius is still studied at military academies. His battles are analyzed, his politics discussed, and his courage mythologized. But there's something about Alexander that no one has ever been able to explain. How is it possible that a man who conquered half the world just disappears? Where did the body of Alexander the Great go? Where is the tomb of the greatest conqueror of antiquity? How is it possible that we know almost everything about his wars, but nothing about his final resting place? This is no ordinary historical mystery. This is something much bigger, something that defies logic, something that has baffled scholars for over 2 millennia. Because Alexander was not just a king, he was a symbol of power, immortality, and divine descent. And that's exactly why his vanished body opens doors to something much deeper. This is the story of a golden coffin that vanished, of a king who may have been buried alive, of an empire that fell into chaos the moment his breath stopped. But before it disappears, let's go back to the beginning. The rise of Alexander the Great. Born in 356 BC in Pella, the capital of ancient Macedonia, Alexander was the son of King Philip II and Queen Olympias. His childhood was marked by the early death of his half-brother, which left him as the heir apparent to the throne. From a young age, he was destined to take on the weight of the world. Under the tutelage of Aristotle, the greatest philosopher of his time, Alexander gained an exceptional education in philosophy, science, and literature. His intellect was far ahead of his years, and he quickly proved that he was more than just a royal heir. He was a visionary who sought to leave an indelible mark on history. As a teenager, Alexander showed immense skill in both politics and warfare. At just 16 years old, he led an army to victory in the Battle of Cheronea, where he helped secure the Macedonian dominance in Greece. But this was only the beginning. When his father, King Philip II, was assassinated in 336 BC, Alexander was thrust into power. At only 20 years old, he became the King of Macedonia and immediately embarked on a series of military campaigns that would forever change the course of history. His conquests were legendary. He first turned his attention to the Persian Empire, which had been a thorn in Greece's side for centuries. In a series of decisive battles, including the Battle of Issus and the Battle of Gaugamela, Alexander crushed the Persian forces and pushed all the way to the heart of the empire. In addition to his military genius, Alexander had a remarkable ability to inspire loyalty in his troops. His soldiers followed him across vast distances, enduring extreme hardships and facing formidable enemies. But Alexander's brilliance wasn't limited to the battlefield. He was a master diplomat, uniting the disparate regions of his empire by respecting their cultures and integrating their leaders into his administration. By the time he was in his early 30s, Alexander had created an empire that stretched from Greece to Egypt and from the Persian heartland to India. His goal was nothing short of global domination. He dreamed of one world, one empire, and one ruler, himself, the mysterious death of Alexander. But just as Alexander seemed to be on the cusp of realizing his grand vision, fate intervened. In the spring of 323 BC, while in the city of Babylon, Alexander fell ill. The accounts of his illness are as mysterious as his death. According to ancient historians, he developed a fever that lasted for several days and eventually led to his death. The precise cause of his illness remains a subject of speculation. Some ancient accounts suggest that Alexander was poisoned by his political enemies, possibly even by members of his own court. However, the theory of poisoning has been largely dismissed by modern historians, as the symptoms of poisoning would likely have killed him much more quickly than the slow fever he reportedly suffered from. Another theory is that Alexander contracted a viral infection, such as typhoid fever or malaria. Given the location of his death, these diseases were rampant in Babylon, and their symptoms closely match those described in ancient texts. However, this theory doesn't explain one crucial detail: the state of his body after death. The strange preservation of his body. The body of a normal person would begin to decompose quickly after death, especially in the warm climate of Babylon. But Alexander's body remained remarkably intact for several days, despite the hot conditions. Ancient accounts describe how his body remained in a state of perfect preservation, even when his generals began to prepare for the funeral rites. In ancient times, such preservation of a dead body was considered a divine sign. It led many to believe that Alexander was not merely a mortal man, but something more. Some even suggested that his body was preserved because it had been imbued with supernatural qualities. Alexander had, after all, claimed to be a direct descendant of the gods, specifically the god Zeus, and some believed that his divine nature was what kept his body from decaying. But there was another, more disturbing possibility. What if Alexander wasn't dead at all? What if he had somehow been kept alive, perhaps in a comatose state, or even in some kind of artificial preservation, so that he could continue to be revered as a living god? This theory, while outlandish, has persisted throughout history. The idea that Alexander's death may have been staged, either by his own will or by those around him, raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of his empire and the forces at play behind the scenes. The disappearance of his tomb. What happens next in Alexander's story is perhaps the most baffling mystery of all. His tomb. According to ancient records, his body was initially placed in a golden sarcophagus and placed on a lavish funeral procession back to Macedonia. However, before it could reach its intended destination, the procession was intercepted by Ptolemy, one of Alexander's generals. Ptolemy, who would later become the ruler of Egypt, saw the opportunity to use Alexander's body as a political tool. He had the body transported to Egypt, where it was placed in the city of Alexandria, the city Alexander himself had founded. For centuries, the tomb of Alexander the Great in Alexandria became a place of pilgrimage for emperors and dignitaries. Julius Caesar, Augustus, and many other prominent leaders visited the tomb to pay their respects to the great conqueror. But by the 4th century AD, the tomb suddenly vanished from historical records. The tomb of Alexander the Great, one of the most famous and significant in history, simply disappeared. No one knows where it went or why it was abandoned. There are several theories regarding the fate of Alexander's tomb. Some suggest that it was destroyed in a massive earthquake that struck Alexandria. Others believe that it was intentionally destroyed by early Christians who sought to erase traces of paganism and the old gods. Still, others propose that the tomb was moved to a secret location, either by the Romans or by later powers who sought to protect the body from desecration. One of the most intriguing theories is that Alexander's tomb was deliberately hidden, possibly to prevent anyone from gaining too much power by controlling the body of such a legendary figure. There are even suggestions that the tomb was moved to the Vatican, where it remains hidden to this day. The ongoing search for Alexander's tomb. For over 2 millennia, historians, archaeologists, and treasure hunters have searched for the tomb of Alexander the Great. Dozens of expeditions have been launched to find the legendary resting place of the king who conquered the world. In recent years, new discoveries in Egypt have reignited interest in the search for Alexander's tomb. Archaeologists have uncovered massive underground structures in the area surrounding Alexandria, leading some to speculate that they may be connected to the lost tomb. In 2020, Egyptian archaeologists uncovered a massive underground complex near the Oracle of Amun in Siwa, an ancient desert oasis where Alexander was believed to have visited. Some believe that this may be the key to unlocking the mystery of his final resting place. However, the search for Alexander's tomb remains elusive. Despite years of effort, no definitive evidence has been found. Many believe that the tomb is still out there, waiting to be discovered. The legacy of Alexander the Great. Regardless of where his body lies, Alexander's legacy continues to shape the world to this day. His empire may have crumbled after his death, but the ideas and innovations he introduced have left an indelible mark on history. Alexander's vision of a united world, one in which cultures and peoples were interconnected, still resonates in modern society. His military strategies are still studied by generals and military scholars, and his influence on the development of Western civilization cannot be overstated. But the mystery of his death and the disappearance of his tomb continues to haunt us. It serves as a reminder that history is not always as it seems. Sometimes, the greatest figures in history leave behind more questions than answers, and perhaps that is what makes Alexander the Great even more fascinating. The enigma of his life and death, the mystery of his body, and the unanswered questions about his legacy all combine to make him one of the most compelling figures in history. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments. Do you think we'll ever find the tomb of Alexander the Great? And if so, why do you think they've kept it hidden for so long? Because maybe history didn't forget Alexander. Maybe Alexander chose to forget us.